Welcome to Notes to My Legal Self. Together, we explore topics of interest to in-house lawyers. We cover career, practice tips, leadership, the future of law, mental health, legal tech, and much, much more. Know someone who'd make a great guest? Let us know. Self-nominations are encouraged. They're an act of courage. Want to get the most from this conversation? Ask questions, comment, like, follow, say hello. In short, engage. Finally, have fun. In-house legal practice is a serious business, but you don't have to take yourself seriously. Let's begin. Here's your host, Olga Mack.
Well, hello everyone. It's good to see you. It's been long. I have been traveling. I have a lot of travel in October, September, and November usually. And this year is no different. So we have conversation when we can. And when we can, they are amazing conversations. Today, I have a spectacular guest. She is a very enlightened woman. I don't know her very well. I am really excited to get her to know her much better. And without further ado, Avril, welcome to Notes to My Legal Self. I look forward to this conversation. Please introduce yourself.
Well, hello, Olga, and all of you who are watching. I'm delighted to be here to share today. At present, I am an independent corporate director, and I had the company that I was part of for the last 4 years was just acquired. So I'm excited. It was an information technology company that was privately held, and I am continuing to work in the space for corporate directorship, and I'm an executive and I'm getting ready to launch my website. So I'm excited. Things are going well.
I love it. I love when things are going well, and I would like to dive deeper into your directorship career. And before we go into all of that exciting stuff, I like to situate people in where you've been, what you've seen, what was the scenic route, how did you get to be where you are today, Avril?
Well, it was a nonlinear path, and I'm excited about that. When I left law school, I wanted to do more, and I couldn't figure out yet what that more was, but I knew that I wanted to do more than practice alone. And so I took a public policy fellowship when I graduated, which I was probably the only person in my class that didn't go straight to either law practice or clerking. And from there, I was a chief of staff in Sacramento, California, and one of the first women at that time, maybe the fourth. And in the I got 12, I got 11 of 12 bills signed by an opposite party governor, which was sort of a record at the time. So it sort of made my reputation in that space. I relocated and became a nonprofit executive in North Carolina. And from there, moved to the public defender. And after that, I took a leave of absence and moved to Japan, where I was a consultant to senior level Japanese executives in a consulting firm. And I worked to create opportunities for Japanese women in Western firms. And I taught law at Temple University, Japan campus. I returned to the public defender for about a year and a half. And then I was appointed to the judiciary by North Carolina's governor. And I served a full term and in civil, criminal, and family court, and made a national reputation for my court and for myself in the drug treatment movement. After that, I did some consulting. I lost an election in 2004. I hated to lose. I'm a very competitive person, but it was a blessing because it allowed me to get back to so many things that were forbidden to me as a judge. I could do things in community that I liked. So I moved to Washington, D.C. after a year of consulting, and then went to the federal government. I was at a variety of roles at HUD, the legislative office, the regulations office. I even did some work with the union as a union leader, where I helped draft supplements to the union contract. I've always been interested in human capital, and so I was able to continue in that direction. Then I went to ethics and helped revamp the ethics training for the entire agency to offer that opportunity to others. Other than my law practice, I did a lot of community work. I was the chair of the Economic Development Commission in Arlington County, Virginia, which is a tech hub, and worked a lot with technology. I was also chair of the Arlington Community Foundation, where I helped to revamp and revivify that board. And we went from 18 million to 32 million in 3 years of my leadership in terms of monies under advisement, because we were a donor advised fund. So, but I've been involved and engaged in community throughout my legal career.
Woo! You've done a few things all over the world, from
All over the
Sacramento to
world.
North Carolina to Japan. I
Yes,
think it's fair to say, Avril, that you get out.
I do. I do.
Oh, I love it. Um, Very interesting career paths that involves all kinds of things, from government service to teaching to community leadership to appointments to running election, all kinds of stuff. I mean, I'm still processing putting things on a timeline, thinking that you probably started when you were 5, because there's no way a human being can fit all of that. And I'm really good at fitting a lot of stuff in my life too. But wow, you outdid yourself. I love that. And it's very clear that, after law school, you took a different path, and somehow we're thinking that law, and as you put it, is not enough. Tell me more about that. What happened? How did you get to that conceptualization of your legal, non-legal career?
Well, I'll say that it started off, I've always been interested in people and community. And I was a history major in college. I wanted to remain broad. I'm in the humanities. I took languages, I'm in social science. I could see, and I was nervous about it in law school, that I was going to become more narrow than I wanted to be. And I had to think clearly about how can I prevent that? I knew that one of the reasons I'd gone to law school was to shift systems and to create opportunity. I'm one of the first in a generation to go to integrated schools. I knew that the law could be used in more than one way and in a variety of ways. And I wanted to use my education and my ability to connect with others to broaden and shift and change what the definition of a law practice might be, what lawyers do, and how they impact community around them. And not just the law community, but of the broader community.
So I love that theme of sort of broadening. You wanted to be broader. I think the phrase you said, this was more narrow than I wanted to be. In thinking sort of broad versus narrow, how do you conceptualize that, and why is this broad impact and systems thinking is important to you?
Well, I'll say this, not every lawyer becomes narrow, but I think the profession drives you to expertise in a particular practice area. I would say to you that I'm a very good lawyer and I was a good judge, and I've had a number of practice areas. I go deep when I'm in it, and then it's part of my repertoire, and I move on, and I don't feel badly about leaving it to pick up something else, right? So I think that that's part of the challenge. I was a criminal lawyer at first, right? But as I said, I was a nonprofit executive before that. I was a legal eagle as a chief of staff. I wasn't acting as an attorney, but I'm using my legal practice and legal understanding to get things done in the California legislature. So I wanted to look at it differently and to say, where could a lawyer's background be useful, even if you're not actually practicing? Because, I had ledge counsel did all the drafting, but I was an idea person and I worked to get things through the legislature because I understand that system. I was an executive in a nonprofit. We have counsel, so I didn't need to be the lawyer. I have legal background, but I let our lawyers handle the legal aspects of the job. I wanted to be an executive, and I wanted to be able to bring the background to everything that I did. And I think that many lawyers later in career wish or want to be executives, but it's hard to switch if you haven't been doing it. If you've been taking work that others give you, assignments that others give you alone, sometimes it's hard for other people to see you as a leader. A leader in the law, exactly, but a leader in the business, it's harder. So I wanted to do these things simultaneously so that I could be the leader in the nonprofit business and I could be the leader in the for-profit business.
I love it. That's very insightful. As someone who's taken now 3 or 4 jobs without a legal title, I can tell you it was sort of an event in my life. It actually was sort of more than an event. It's still sort of a process of thinking of yourself other than exclusively as a lawyer. What was the first non-legal job you took? Why did you take it? And how did you sort of deal with the fact that it was not a legal job? Was it easy? Was it hard? How did you lawyer yourself in the process?
Well, I would say the first one was the legislative aid in the Capitol. We have plenty of lawyers. I didn't need to be one. What I loved doing was interacting with chambers of commerce, with constituents, with the members of the legislature, some of whom are lawyers, but some are not. You have to be able to speak to people without the legal jargon. You have to be able to get them to understand what you're trying to do. And if your member has an agenda, it's not necessarily a legal agenda, it's a legislative agenda. And so I knew my role and I played that role, but I also had a great rapport with the lawyers with whom I worked because we had common understanding.
So the pivoting and broadening and system thinking, while super exciting, I can tell you firsthand it's a lot of effort. Because you have one training and then you see opportunity that other people may not be taking. You can imagine yourself in the role, and then you actually have to take steps toward that, and that takes work. How do you deal with all that extra effort, that sort of upskilling that needs to happening, that networking that needs to be happening, that changing the way you think about the world that needs to be happening? I mean, as exciting as it sounds, I'm a mother of two and the wife of one and a friend to many, right? I have other lives and hobbies and things that occupy me. So it's a lot of effort. How do you deal with that?
Well, it was a lot of effort. And these are calculated risks that I'm taking. There's no guarantee that it would have worked out. But that's part of the challenge and what makes it exciting. I also understood I'm married, I'm the mother of one. I've relocated based on sometimes my husband's position. So I get into a space and I use my analytical training, my legal training for my benefit as if I'm a client. What would I do for a client in this situation? I'm the client. I'm my primary client throughout my career. I never skimped on the work I did for others. I was a great lawyer and I gave everything. But when you leave it all on the field for a client, you got to think of the same thing, leaving it on the field for yourself. So the networking has to be broader. I remained active in communities, not just when I moved, but like a part of my background with the university. I was always active in the Bolt or Berkeley law community. I was on the board in the early 2000s as a judge. I came back to the 5-year reunion and somebody asked me, would you be interested in serving on the board? Now, I was networking. Of course, as a judge, I couldn't take the benefit of business opportunities, but I network with the people. So over almost 40 years out of law school, I know quite a few members of my class and classes around me. I also, when I get into communities, I work with the League of Women Voters. That's the one thing when I moved to Charlotte, and I did a project for them that had to do with zoning, and they needed a permit. Well, I was a public defender, but I did that. And so I got to know a ton of women who were interested in politics in a nonpartisan organization. So when I decided I wanted to run for judge, I had a network of people that had worked with me and knew me and could write to the governor on my behalf. Also, I worked with the bar. One thing that brought me to the attention of the governor is that I noted the constitutional challenge in North Carolina state courts where there were not sufficient and regular interpreter services for language minorities. I asked about it for a while. I was a new public defender, a baby lawyer, and then I wrote an article. Well, I'm sure the governor saw that. The chief judge got mad at me, called me in. We're working on it. And I said, well, you can't keep working on it while you continue to try people without this constitutional protection. So it kind of made me a bigger impact in my job as assistant public defender. I also was on the board of a bioethics group that was affiliated with Presbyterian Hospital. I got up at 7 o'clock in the morning for the board meetings because I had to be in court by 9. And we talked, we had clergy, lawyers, physicians, nurses, practitioners across the gamut, helping doctors and medical staff make difficult decisions at the beginning of life and end of life. I drafted the first do not resuscitate order for the state of North Carolina. It didn't pass in the 90s when I was on that board, but subsequent language was written and it passed some years later after I had relocated. So I broadened my impact beyond the courthouse and the courtroom and the individual clients I worked with. I started something that every North Carolinian benefits from, the right to sign a do not resuscitate order while you are able, so that you can have agency over decisions. So I looked at what I knew how to do because I had written legislation before and took it where it would be most useful. And in that way, I met a ton of people, going to Raleigh, the state capital. I had testified before legislative bodies before. I had worked with my own governor before in California. So those things weren't unusual to me when I moved to North Carolina. And when I was interviewed by the governor for the judiciary, I think I impressed him because I spoke like a business person. I talked about the liability and the loss of public trust and the constitutional harm that we would cause if we continued to proceed without giving people the adequate interpreter services. So he's looking at it as liability. He's thinking like an executive. And I'm speaking to him as a business person, speaking to the executive of the state. And I think that impressed him. It wasn't just lawyering I was doing. I was talking to him about the enterprise of the state of North Carolina state courts.
Thank you for that very detailed explanation. And we have Sheila, who is saying hello a few times. Welcome to the show. And I hope other folks are very much enjoying and part of this conversation, because Avril is just throwing away gems. She's sharing her brilliance and very generously. I like your framework around treating yourself as a client, sort of reframing the way you talk to yourself and problem solve. Just curious, what are sort of practical steps in sort of, you find yourself, say, in a new place because you followed your spouse, or because you relocated, or you decided to broaden, and you are applying that framework you described of treating yourself as a client. What would you do for the client? What are the sort of practical steps that you take so that you sort of move yourself in a streamlined way from point A to point B as you would your client?
That's a great question. What I did when I first moved to North Carolina, for example, I got very involved in the bar. And I was also involved prior to my joining the public defender's office. I was an executive at a nonprofit that was regional, YWCA of the Central Carolinas. I was the vice president for programs. So then I have relationships all over North Carolina and upper South Carolina. I'm networking the whole time. I'm working to create new programs and to, say, for example, write up new contracts for the people who lived in our setting. We had a women in transition program. So there were a lot of people that I came in contact with, funders as well as the board members, and I presented to the board all the time. And I spoke to members of the business community in reference to what the YW was trying to accomplish. When I joined the bar, I got involved on a bar committee. The article that I spoke about came because I was starting to interview senior members of the bar, ask them about their careers. And then here I am in the courthouse, voice from the courthouse. So it wasn't a regular column, but I wrote a couple of columns interviewing defense counsel, interviewing members of the DA's office, and talking to the public defender and the DA in reference to challenges in the courthouse. So you see, I did that. I was an active member of my religious community as well. I was a member of my college sorority. I joined the junior league. And when I joined the junior league, I took interior placements because I had worked in community. I wanted to learn the business of the nonprofit. So I worked in interior placements. So I learned about our fundraising, I learned about governance. And all of these things have been a part of what I take as a repertoire whenever I relocate.
Let's talk about your board career. How did it happen to you? Was it intentional? Was it unintentional? Was it sort of the hand that gave you a seat at the table? The story that folks sometimes tell, or was it sort of a very concerted effort with a goal and a step taking toward it? How did it happen? Do you enjoy it? What do you love about it? What would you change about it?
Well, it was a concerted effort. I'll tell you that when I was a public defender, I had expressed an interest in serving on boards because I had been presenting to my board, and a lawyer told me you'll never get there from here, and not as a public defender. And I was kind of like, okay, all right, not great advice for me at this time. All right. I proved him wrong, but I didn't do it to prove him wrong. I understood that there has to be a path. I went to the judiciary after that, and I had to lay fallow all of my contacts, because as a judge, you can't be connected. That was a downside of being on the bench. There were other wonderful things that I loved about it, but I couldn't network the way I used to. I served one term. I had a lot of impact as a judge. My county court got a model court of the year that I didn't win my election. I became someone that traveled all over the country talking about drug courts, and I helped to edit and put together the bench book that judges use now. So I didn't need to stay a judge. I was able to let it go, and then I dove back into the community and business connections that I had always enjoyed before I was on the bench. So I became an appointee to the Economic Development Commission in Arlington County some 7 years ago. The legislators in our county select those board members. I became a board member. I sat on the board for about a year, and then I was tapped to be on the executive board of that commission. And then I rose to become the vice chair. And then I rose to become chair. Now, in my role, I'm working with the Economic Development Office for the county to bring in the tax revenue and to create more opportunities for businesses to relocate to Arlington. And we're a tech hub. After Silicon Valley and Boston, we're what people think of. So I met a lot of technologists, I met a lot of emerging companies, and I had worked on a program for tech employment, tech workforce apprenticeships as a member of that commission, a chair of the workforce task force. And one of the members of that commission was a CEO who said, come and join my board. I'd like to pursue these ideas that we've been talking about in the task force. So that's how I got on my first paid board. It was a startup. And as I said at the start of the hour, it was acquired just about a month ago. So I'm looking for new boards now, not necessarily in technology, but my governance background, my ability to do government relations helped us get government contracts. And at the same time, I'm an employee of the federal government, but I chose a board that didn't have any conflicts with my work at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I also chose not to be an appointee because people said you need to be in the Biden administration, you need to be an appointee. I chose strategically not to do that and not to secure an SES position, senior executive service, because I wanted the freedom to do my outside activities. These are choices that I made. People said, well, you could have been great at this. I said, yes, but I would have been tied to government in a way that wouldn't allow me to do my business and corporate work. So these are choices that I made. And so I want you to think, just like you wouldn't go into court or prepare a brief without thinking about what are my options. If I plead this, do I lose opportunity here? You need to think that way for your own career.
I love the focus on open some doors, close others, and the choices you make, especially when you know, take positions at the board level or judiciary level or government. They do become somewhat mutually exclusive, and things like conflict of interest become increasingly important, especially as we are part of transparent government movement and laws, and conflict of interest in corporations is sort of a big deal. So I love the sort of sober thinking through those issues and deciding which paths to take for now and maybe pursue other paths in the future or never. We are coming to the end. I do have a few questions that I want to ask. Specifically, I want to talk a little bit more about how satisfying it was to be a judge or not. After all, you were dealing with drug issues, and I'm a former DA in San Francisco, and those are some of the hardest issues really because we criminalize addiction essentially, and we can see someone really needs medical help, and yet the only way we sometimes can help them using the legal system is incarceration, which is not helpful at all sometimes. So I'm curious, as a judge who had to deal with that and who've seen that sort of human suffering, what was sort of the benefit and satisfying of being a judge, and maybe what was hard?
I love being a judge. It was when I was a public defender, I was the least powerful person in the courtroom. And I needed to increase my power so that I could move and shift systems. I understood that the judiciary would give me that perch, and that's why I pursued it. I started off as a criminal lawyer, but I was a civil, criminal, general jurisdiction judge. And then I became certified in family court. And then I went further and became interested in the family drug court system. Part of my legacy there is, I said, to expand and perpetuate those family drug courts all throughout the country. I became a consultant while I was a judge and then after, because people wanted me to come to their jurisdictions and talk about it because we had a good record of reunification. I also was part of the judiciary. We had in family court at the time, there was a rule in North Carolina where you could hear underage women who wanted to talk about whether or not they were able to get a court order to have health care. Many of my colleagues wouldn't do that, but I let it be known I'm in the courthouse. If they come at lunchtime, I can fit them into my calendar so that I can help people get the health care that's necessary for them. Some of these were students. They had traveled, they played hooky and came across the state to a larger community so that nobody would know them, and they needed a hearing. And so I did provide that. As I said, that bench book that has continued to be a resource for drug court judges, I played a major part in that, and I'm glad. So I learned not to look back. I did what I could while I was there. One thing, I opened the door for judges who were not from the private sector or the DA's office or the AG. I was the first assistant public defender to be appointed to the bench in my county. So it opened the door for legal aid lawyers to look for the job, legal aid and private defense counsel and public defenders. And so the judiciary is very different since I broke through in 2001 with my appointment. So I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I had to change that system and to make it possible for all kinds of great lawyers to be considered for that role.
So, Avril, as I said, it's fair to say you've done a few things. It is also fair to say that you get out, and every time you do, you make an impact. I love it all. What's next? What is next for Avril?
Well, I'm looking to continue my corporate board roles. I am very excited about AI governance. I'm particularly interested in that. I have a long background in corporate governance, but I'm going out and speaking and talking to boards as well as general counsels about how board members need to be ready to really make the good decisions by asking the right questions. And many of our board members don't have that background. I'm looking for companies that are interested in adopting AI who need somebody who can lead that discussion on the adequate and particular governance. I'm also interested in training the judiciary on AI and technology. You'd never dream of putting a matter in front of a judge if you were in family court without going to an expert in family court. You need the judiciary to have this background, because now that Loper Bright has been decided, these cases are going to come down to federal court, and each state has its own AI regulatory rubric, and so they're going to be state court matters. So judges need to be advised how they can make good decisions regarding this new technology. So I love innovation. I've tried to be an innovator throughout my career. This is a new frontier, and it's tremendously exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. And it's exciting to be practicing law or being outside of law in this age of new capabilities and really that blow my imagination every day. So, what is sort of one takeaway or action item you have for, you know, in-house lawyers that have an opportunity to think about their career, to advise senior leadership, to manage boards that have an impact?
Well, I would say, first of all, think about creating your career. Don't be passive. Like, you can move up, but make sure the moving up is the direction you'd like to go. All right. And if you are in house, you need to be thinking of ways to get in front of your board. You need to get used to that setting. It is a rarefied setting. And often your chief legal counsel gets that opportunity. But where are you in the organization? You need to find a way to get to be in that role. You don't have to be chief counsel to get there. So I'm just saying you need to be thinking creatively about, how do I make the seat that I'm in propel me to where I'd like to go? And you have to make some hard choices. If you're in a situation that doesn't seem like it's going to be changeable and is not conducive to your ambition, you're going to need to make some changes and be okay with that. Live with the ambiguity, but plan as much as you can. As I said, not everything is plannable, though, and you just need to be open and recognize where you can create impact, so you can talk about what you did. Like, as I said, as the economic development chair, I'm responsible for bringing and managing businesses that bring in $65 million in a calendar year. That gives me a lot of clout and power, but it also means that I understand what it takes. When I was the chair of the board of trustees of the Arlington Community Foundation, we went from 18 million to 32 million in 3 years, my last 3 years of my tenure in leadership. I know how to do those things. You need to talk about, what does an executive do? How does an executive think? And then recognize that as a board member, you're not an executive of the company. You are providing oversight and guidance, and these are different roles. So just be thinking about it. Stay well read. Don't just read what you need for your job.
Those are great takeaways. Avril, thank you so much for joining this conversation. I love your insights. I love your experiences. I love your impact. And I love how broadly you think about what it means to be a legal executive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I was delighted to join you today, and I hope that that I can inspire some to think out of the box. Lawyers are not often asked to do that.
I am sure you have. You absolutely have one person who is completely inspired. So thank you so much. And I'm sure there are many others. Thank you so much, audience, for joining and being active and asking questions. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you for stopping by. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Notes to My Legal Self. Know someone who'd make a great guest? Let us know. Self-nominations are encouraged. They are an act of courage. Remember, the future of law is bright. Enjoy your in-house practice. It's an adventure of a lifetime. See you soon.